are out here to talk more about the Dragoon pistols with Larry Hedrick here by my side. And we're down, I don't know if you'd say in the shadow of, but we're by Whitlow Dam. Some Black Angus here behind us. This is nice because we don't have to pay them anything for being on here. And so we're on our way out there. We thought we'd stop here and let Larry give a little bit of the history of the area that we're in right now, because this is a part of your past, yes, right here. So why don't you tell us where we're at and what you did out here?
Okay, well, you know, I went into the Army right out of high school, and my dad sold our farm in Kansas and retired out here. And when my active service was over, I didn't have a home. so I came out here to see Dad, and he was living at the Anchor P Trailer Court in Higley and Maine in East Mesa. And it was owned by a fellow named Pete Allen. And Pete was a retired Navy guy, and he had purchased the homestead of Hart Mullins, which was homesteaded in 1915. And the only house in the whole valley was the rock house that Hart had built, probably with his brother Jesse. Hart's dad was a stagecoach driver from Superior to Florence. And Pete, you know, he knew I had just got out of the service and wasn't doing anything, and he said he needed some help. Would I work for him? And I agreed. And he was running some cattle out here, and he wanted me to keep an eye on his cattle. There were a lot of mountain lions in this area at the time. And in fact, some of the ranchers off over to the east had dogs, and they organized mountain lion hunts on a regular basis. And you know, the other thing he wanted me to do was Pete knew that Whitlow Dam was going to be built, and in order to maintain water rights, the ditch, the irrigation ditch that Hart Mullins had dug himself, had to be maintained in a way that would carry water. And we're standing next to that ditch today. And he took me down. He said, we'll start at the Narrows. And that's just about where we are now, the dam in the background.
Now you have a book.
I have a book.
That where it talks about the Narrows.
This was written in 1974 by Bob Garman. And I bought this in 1976 and read it. And there was a page in there that mentions supplies would be available, a place called the Narrows along Queen Creek where the flood control dam is, and commonly called the Narrows. Well, I didn't know anything about the Lost Dragoon pistols at that time, but when I read the story, the story was published in 3 different parts in a newspaper, written by a friend of mine. And it never mentioned anything until the last part of it. It mentioned the Narrows. So I knew exactly where we were talking about. Everybody, you know, the story told about a dominant pointed peak, which everybody thinks was Weaver's Needle. And they were attacked right here where that dam is by the Apaches. They never made it anywhere near Weaver's Needle.
Weaver's Needle is over here, quite a ways from where we're at. We're in back of the main mountain.
Right.
And you pointed out we're nowhere near that.
Nowhere. We're at least 5 miles.
Yeah. And
the ditch here has been opened up by machinery since, I didn't even know it was this wide now, but it was only about 2.5 feet wide and about this tall. And runoff from the hillsides had broken some of the walls down and backfilled the ditch. And he put me to, you know, this thing is at least a half a mile long. And he put me out here cleaning out that ditch and repairing the walls. Thank you. And
they're ad-libbing.
It got to be it was the summer of 58. And I was out here the last part of 58 and 59 living in the rock house. It was a Motel 4, and they didn't leave a light on for you. I mean, we didn't have
Which is right over here. There's a big clump of palm trees right out in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful.
And Pete Allen planted those palm trees out there with this irrigation water, and that's what ended up in the golf course. And Anyway, he brought out 2 more guys to help me out. One was an Apache Indian, and one was a guy fresh over from England. And I mean, what a combination. A Limey, an Okie, and an Apache.
There's no PC here, okay?
Yeah. The Apache never said a word.
Yeah.
The Englishman never shut up. It was quite a thing.
Well, that's a great combination.
But anyway, we finally got the job done. And it was an enjoyable experience. I mean, I was footloose and fancy-free, and I had a big iron strap to my hip, and Pete had a lever-action rifle in the rock house, and before I'd turn in for bed, I'd go out and fire off around to let the mountain lions know that, hey, somebody's looking after the cattle.
There you go. That footloose and fancy-free to me was something else other than being out here with a gun and some mountain lions. But okay,
but
good for you.
I enjoyed it, and reading the story of the Lost Dragoons, and knowing that this book had a common place called the Narrows, and actually working at the Narrows, when I read the story, I knew exactly where to start looking.
So when you were working out here, this was called the Narrows, is that correct?
Right where the dam is.
Where the dam is. Now, why was that called the Narrows?
Well, you can see by the mountains themselves.
Just the mountains where the dam is between.
Right.
Okay.
It's like a pass.
Got it.
You know, and this is where the military came through all the time on their way back and forth from Camp Pinnell to Fort McDowell. They didn't go through the mountains with small groups of people. The Apaches were
That
up
would be
there.
stupid.
That would be suicide.
But along the trail right in here where
Right.
they went through the military trail.
Right. And the stage line.
So we're standing basically where, not necessarily this road or where we're at, but this is where the stage line would go through.
Exactly. Yep. When I was here, of course, the dam wasn't here. The dam was built in 1960. I was here in late 58 and early 59. But this is where Pete Allen brought me to start cleaning out the ditch that carries the water down to where the golf course is today. And it was very narrow, very small. You can see that they've backhoed this thing out into something amazing, and you can understand why. They've got to handle the water that comes down through here, and they can easily divert it back down Queen Creek, some of it. But they're trying to salvage whatever water they can now for the valley. And as I said, it was very small, but it was it was a long ways, and it was a lot of work to muck this out and repair the walls. And I can imagine what Hart went through. I mean, well, we just done it with shovels. We didn't have anything else.
That's amazing. Of course, now they've come in and dug it a little bit more, but how far did you dig with the shovels, you say?
All the way down to the rock house where the just above the golf course.
Ways from here.
Right. It's got to be 3/4 of a mile.
Oh, wow. Larry, we're looking right now at some white quartz that you're thinking how far had that traveled to get to where it is right now when this river was flowing. This is Queen Creek.
This is Queen Creek.
This is not the town Queen Creek or the city, so we're far from there.
Mm-hmm.
But this was Queen Creek right here. The water is now diverted by the dam. You can probably hear it in the background. To the ditch that you built or helped build 100 years ago. Is that right?
Well, 60 years ago.
60 years ago.
And
I'm being facetious, but yeah, 60 years ago. But the quartz there, and then right down below it here, where there's some little ponds where the mud is, you were saying that would be a perfect place if you're going to look in this area for gold, because it would have been carried down through the river.
Yeah, no telling how far that bull quartz was carried down to get here, and it's the only piece you see. And bedrock is what miners go for when they want to find some gold, because that's where it's going to settle to, and it can't go any deeper. Now, I don't know if there's any gold, even a trace of gold here, but I'm just...
But this would be the place to look.
This would be a good place to look.
Larry, we're here in what is now called the Queen Valley Country Club Bar. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of the place?
This is a rock house that I lived in the late 1958 and early 1959. It was homesteaded originally by Hart Mullins in 1915, and then Pete Allen purchased it from him. and he was running cattle out here, and I lived in this rock house.
Right here.
And there's been a lot of changes. They've restuccoed the walls. There was only the one entrance. They've added these entrances and the buildings onto it to where you can't see much of the original. But we're in the original room, and particularly the fireplace,
Basically
which is
stone.
Which is also
what you see is all the original stone. They've just
right.
stuccoed over.
They restuccoed, and so this is where I cowboyed for a while. Well, anyway, you know, one morning my two guys pulled into the yard. I'd never met Hart at that time. And then my dad come in. Pete Allen must have introduced him to Hart. And they were going to take my dad up to some of their claims. And since I was here, they asked if I wanted to go, so I went. And we went up to Elephant Butte, where they had some claims. And then we drove over to Buzzard's Roost, where they had some claims. Then Hart took us on up to Bayous Butte, and over against the main mountain, he took us to where a shaft had been dug in a kind of a natural, it wasn't really a cave, but it was a cutout in the mountains that was natural. And a lot of work had been done there by hand, building a trail to get to it that was cut in a cliffside and quite a sharp drop off. And this was the first time I ever heard the Lost Dutchman legend. And Hart and his brother sat there and told my dad and I the whole legend of the Lost Dutchman. This is 1958. And I got to fooling around down there, and I went down to the bottom of the cliffs and stuff, and I found an old wheelbarrow there. And it was amazing. It's not something you'd ever buy in a store.
Yeah.
You know, it was handmade. You could see the bottom of it had been bent over all the way around, and the bottom had been forged, heated, and hammered together. There was no rivets. There was no nothing. It had an iron wheel and all that sort of stuff. And I yelling up that I'd found this, and they said, well, bring it up. It took me about a half an hour to work around to get up there, and they were amazed by it. And Hart was claiming that this dig was one of the Peralta digs. And he was saying, we're within half a mile of the Lost Dutchman.
This is just up here.
Well, off over here.
This way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, they were amazed by this wheelbarrow, and they came to the conclusion that it was Mexican. And I thought, well, now, how would they haul something this far on the back of a burro, you know? But then you couldn't have made it here. So maybe it was, I don't know. Anyway, my dad took it home, put it in his yard for yard art. He died in 1966, and somebody stole it.
Oh, gee. I was going to say, where is it now?
Yeah, I'd love to have it.
So that prospect is still up there.
Oh, yes.
Still up there. Gosh, one of these days we're going to have to go up there and take a look at it if we can. But this is amazing, because you say we're like about 5 miles away from
at least 5
Weaver's
miles.
Needle.
At least 5 miles.
And yet we're still in the wilderness area of the Superstitions, and you're talking about what they allegedly say was a Peralta mine behind us here. We're in the Queen Creek area. Not Queen Valley. Queen Valley.
All right.
Well, that's big difference. Big
Queen
difference.
Creek and Queen Valley.
Yeah. Okay. And so you just don't realize until you get out here how expansive the area that we're talking about is. It's amazing. So we're gonna be going up and talk about the pistols a little more, as we did in an earlier segment. But this is amazing. Anything else you can tell us about this area?
Well, not really. I haven't been out here for years. I was amazed that they dug this out so big, but then, you know, it is for flood control as well as irrigation. And there was a well down at the rock house, and the cattle would come in every night to get water. And my job, of course, was to fire up he had a generator to run a pump jack, although, you know, it was kerosene lamps in the house, and the cattle would bed down there for the night. So it was easy to keep an eye on them. You didn't really need to worry about mountain lions and stuff during the day. It was at night, and these were yearling calves he had out there, so they would be an easy takedown, you know. So that was my cowboy days.
Well, you know, I'm thinking now a steak dinner would probably be good. All right, we're going to head on up a little further and talk about some of the other things along the trail.